You're tuned into the Sportscast with Brian, Craig, and Jeff. Give you all the sports news you need. We give you outspoken thoughts about all the headlines. We talk baseball, football, hockey, and more. No matter the topic, we cover it. Get ready for the show and keep it outspoken. Keep it outspoken. We keep it outspoken only on the Sportscast. Tune into the Sportscast with Brian, Craig, and Jeff. Give you all the sports news you need.
So one. All right, everybody. A quick introduction there. As I got my good buddy Jeff Camponozzi on the line, he's come in to talk about the PlayStation 5. And if there's any questions I have about electronics or PlayStation, I usually go to my good friend Jeff. How's it going, buddy? How are you?
Going good.
Good, man. Good. Well, first off, do you know what that intro music is?
The intro music is, well, there's two ways I know what it is. A, I watched the Michael Jordan, at least the first two episodes so far of me and my wife did of was it The Last Dance? Is that what it's called?
Yes, that's exactly why I
Last
played
Dance.
it. We recorded it on last Sunday, and we're gonna record it again. We'll watch it on Monday. I'm super excited about that. It's very well done, and I grew up. I missed out on the what I call the good basketball years, and I missed out on the good Michael Jordan. So I'm interested to go back and see that part of it. How about you?
Oh, absolutely. My wife was a huge basketball fan in the 90s and even in some of the 2000s and stuff like that, early 2000s. And so, yeah, she was like big into it. She watched all the time. They actually had the NBA League Pass or whatever. So
Nice.
they would watch, she would watch every game and write down stats and watch all the different teams. So she was a big Michael Jordan fan. She actually got to see the Bulls play the last year. So in 97,
No way.
she went to, her and her dad and her mom, they went to San Antonio because Houston. And they couldn't watch. I guess maybe it had been sold out at the Reunion Arena because at the time the Mavericks were playing at the Reunion Arena. So, but I think she went to Houston to go watch them play in '97. So she watched the official Bulls team, the '97 Bulls team, in its entirety in terms of playing live. And so I was
That's
like, that's
sick.
amazing. Yeah.
That's sick.
So-
I talked to my wife, and my wife, she was a big basketball fan. She grew up watching the Mavericks, and she grew up playing basketball. But we've been actually watching it together. And I tell her all the time, that is the era of basketball I wish I grew up in. I was a young kid. I really didn't pay attention to basketball at the time, so I missed out on the those rivalries with Michael and Magic and all that stuff going on. So I call that those are the good basketball years that I missed. So I was excited to be able to get a glimpse of what that was and then the Bulls story. So if I had to get that out of the way, I actually my last episode I did last week was on that. So I pulled that up real quick to play it. So I'm glad you're able to watch it, and I'm looking forward to tomorrow's episode. I think they're diving into more about Phil Jackson and Dennis Rodman tomorrow.
Dennis Rodman, yeah, I'm very interested in the Dennis Rodman one. I remember the only thing that I was into sports and stuff. I understood things. I watched and stuff, but I think I didn't really watch them until towards the end. But I knew who he was. I remember in Space Jam, obviously, every kid in the 90s.
Yes,
Yeah.
Space Jam.
And then I remember that was when marketing hit a big time with sports. And so I remember the Air Jordans, and everybody wanted to get the Air Jordans, and kids would come to school with Air Jordans. And you're like, whoa, like it was just that was kind of the first real marketing push that I remember for sports and things like that. So you saw that logo, you knew exactly what it was, the Jumpman logo. So,
Mm-hmm.
so it's
Yeah,
very.
I mean, I love Space Jam and the Jordan shoes, and yeah, exactly. I remember all that stuff going on, and I was telling my wife the most I remember about Jordan playing ended up being in the Washington Wizards uniform. I actually had a Michael Jordan Washington Wizards jersey just because it's Jordan. But
That's
I
pretty
actually,
cool.
yeah, I don't have it anymore. I wish I'd have kept it. But I actually saw something the other day that they said that Kobe Bryant, rest in peace, he actually had a film crew recording his farewell tour his last year, and that's going to be a documentary coming out in a couple of years. So that's going to be really cool because obviously I'm a Lakers fan and a big Kobe Bryant fan, and that's going to be awesome to watch. Might get a little emotional too, So.
Oh yeah, I mean it's interesting because I was telling. Oh, well, while we were watching it, there was somebody who kept referring and said when they talk about the greats, you think of Babe Ruth, you think of Jackie Robinson, or various other players like I'm trying to think of the guy who scored the highest points ever in a basketball game.
Wilt Chamberlain.
And then you think of Michael Jordan. I mean, I think because there's always that person who's like bigger than sports, and he was that. He was kind of like everyone was a fan. No one booed him. No one was against the Bulls unless you were the opposing team fan, obviously.
They beat
but
you every year.
yeah, or
yeah.
like when they were in the playoffs. I mean, a lot of people were rooting for Michael Jordan. I mean, it was just insane, and I think he was one of those players where it's like you didn't really boo him, like you just kind of wanted to watch. And so it's kind of like people say that about Derek Jeter. People say that about, I mean, Kobe Bryant. I don't. He was by far one of the closest things that I could fully see that was like a Michael Jordan. Where it was kind of like I got to see when it started, but with Michael, I didn't. I mean, I wasn't paying attention in '89, or whatever 86 or something like that.
We were about 1 year old at that time.
Pretty much, yeah. 2 or 1, so yeah, I wasn't really paying attention. But there's not many people that are like that one kind of. If you did not see Michael Jordan play, it's one of those things where it's like, even if it was on TV, no one would ever forget that. I think Allie always says, I'll never forget being able to watch him play. So I was like, yeah, that's really cool. And I got to watch Kobe play a few times against the Mavericks. So that was kind of cool too. So it was kind of one of those. And it's interesting, but if you get a chance to see any of the great ones play, you never really forget the moment. So it's kind of like, this is cool because this is one of those moments where you just kind of, you don't want to take it for granted because it doesn't come all the time. So it's interesting. Like when my very first time I ever got to see the Yankees play at Yankee Stadium, it was the old stadium, and we got to see Mo, and we got to see Jeter, and I was just like, I'm never gonna forget this because the stadium's gonna be torn down, and they're building the new one, and this stadium was around during those heydays, during those '90s runs that the Yankees went on, where I would watch on TV and go, gosh, I wish I was there, And so it was just kind of like, to be able to see where history was made is amazing. And one day you'll go to Lambeau Field and you'll know.
Dude, I cannot wait to go to Lambeau Field. Actually staring at a picture. I have a big, huge picture of it right now hanging up above my podcast room. I didn't get to see Kobe Bryant play in person. I regret that one. I didn't get to see Brett Favre play, but I did go see Aaron Rodgers play. And
Mhm.
you're right. You're exactly right. You'll never forget those moments. And now it wasn't a playoff game, but it was here in the Dallas, and
It
it's
was one
great
of
to
those
get to
games that
see him
you'll
play.
remember.
Oh yes, we'll always remember to see the legends just play. So you're exactly right. Yeah,
Awesome.
man, I can't wait to get to Lambeau and go tour it, man. Can't
Yeah,
wait. But
awesome.
if I hope we have a football season this year. I hope we continue sports. Hope baseball starts up, and I
Yeah.
hope basketball continues because this is the year that the Lakers had a real good shot at winning it, and it might be all for nothing. But let's go ahead and get started on that PlayStation 5 talk. Um,
Okay. Speaking of greatness awaits. Isn't that the
yes,
slogan?
yes,
So
greatness awaits. The PlayStation 5 is going to blow your mind. Don't for all you people out there, I talked about last episode as well. Xbox sucks, man. I talk about it all the time. No, yeah, I just got a kid. I got a buddy of mine that's listened to my podcast last week, and he texts. He's like, "Bro, Xbox is good." I'm like, "No, man, Xbox does not compare to the PlayStation 5." And there's always going to be that competitive battle. Um, but the PlayStation 5 is coming out this year. Hopefully, I say hopefully because I've seen some reports because of it that the coronavirus has slowed down production and maybe raised the cost and all this stuff going on. Can you kind of talk into a little bit about how that might affect the releasing of it, and maybe the price of the PlayStation 5?
yeah. The thing is that Sony, when they initially were making PS3s way back, um, they used their own custom computer chip. So their custom CPU, or yeah, I think it was the CPU, was the cell processor, and it was supposed to be this amazing, revolutionary chip that was custom, that was theirs. They made it in house. They had the facilities producing this, and so they were kind of just making it there in Japan. They weren't relying on China. They weren't relying on any other country really, other than just their own in-house stuff. So it was really interesting. It was an amazing piece of technology, but it was so proprietary that a lot of developers, especially outside of the Sony ecosystem, none of the first party really had to deal with it. But any of the third party people like Activision, Bethesda, Electronic Arts, that kind of, any of the people that do that, they had a hard time working with that piece of technology because it was so different than
Right.
Microsoft's. Microsoft was PC hardware structure. It was cut and dry, computer parts off the shelf kind of thing. So you didn't really worry about that. But with PlayStation, when they had to make, let's say they're making Call of Duty for Microsoft, right? When they make the Call of Duty for PS3, they had to make a new game. They had to build it differently. So they didn't want to deal with all that headache. So that's why a lot of third-party games on PS3 were just not, they didn't work right. There was a lot of bugs, there was a lot of hiccups, there was a lot of just mess. Like there's a real, the most famous part of that would be like Skyrim running on PS3, and it was just like dragons would fly backwards. Like, people, all of a sudden people's characters would be inverted. Like it was all these weird things that were happening in that game, or that game breaking things. And people would level up, they'd get to a certain level, and then they'd log back in to play their next game or their next round of whatever they want to play in Skyrim, and they would be gone. So it was just like real weird stuff like that, and a lot of it was to do with this custom stuff. So the reason I'm getting into that is because they built all that in house. Well, with the PS4, they went a different route. No custom hardware, really. They had some custom stuff, but not like where they made your own chips and stuff. They went to AMD to get the GPU and components and CPU components and things like that. They kind of worked on those a little bit custom, so they kind of were able to take that hardware and somewhat tweak it to make it their own a little bit. And you see people do that all the time. Microsoft does that all the time. Even Nintendo, they use an NVIDIA Shield technology for their Switch or for the Switch. And so, but it's custom. So they've tweaked things in there to make things work in their own way, into their to the best of the hardware's ability. So what's interesting is that with PS4, a lot of those components were made in China at Foxconn. A lot of these computer chips now in cell phones, computers, everything are made at a facility called Foxconn. They've been making computer components for things for years. But now, ever since they've kind of been the player in the computer chip market, they make every computer chip from iPhones, Android phones, even stuff inside computers, even stuff that you use for like smart thermostats, all the things that have computer chips in it usually will 90% of the time will come from Foxconn. So when you come to PS5, you run into that issue where Foxconn's in China, and PlayStation 5, they're doing the same round that they did with PS4, where they're like, no fully custom chips. We're going to go with AMD again for the GPU, and we're going to have some CPU abilities as well, but we're just sticking with off-the-shelf components that we customize ourselves. So same route, same thing. They're doing things a little bit different with the system. We'll get into that. But the only issue is that a lot of their manufacturing stuff is coming from China. That's a problem because of all this coronavirus and everything that's going on in China. Now that's died down a little bit in China. Maybe it changes things. We're hearing that it might be not as not affecting it as much as we thought. We're hearing that more. But for example, Google, they released I think the cheaper version of the Pixel 4, so the Pixel 4a, they actually had to change manufacturing to Taiwan because it was supposed to be in China. So it's really interesting to know if this problem is related to China's manufacturing, or if this problem is truly related to what Forbes wrote an article about and talked about and said that it was related to the cooling and some of the component pricing. So, and component scarcity. That's another one. So if there's say iPhone's doing a new iPhone and they're using a component that the PS5 uses, well, iPhone's going to be probably making a lot, and they're going to be wanting a lot more of those components than for PlayStation. So they have to kind of do this balancing act. It's really interesting. It's a lot of their manufacturing that Sony does is in China, so that they kind of shot themselves in the foot a little bit. Hopefully, that's not the case, and it's not because of that, because I don't think it would be. I think it's somewhat about cost and component availability. So, because there's some custom stuff in the system that you're just not going to see anywhere.
Yeah. Well, and they talk about, I saw an article too, it's talking about how, because the PlayStation 4, when it released 7.5 million consoles on the release date, and the PS5, they said between 5 to 6 million. So, I mean, it's not 1.5 million drop off, I guess, as far as consoles being done at that time. I don't know if how bad that will be affect us. We'll probably still see them on the shelves. So, I'm hoping it doesn't get delayed or anything, but I'm super excited for it. And one thing I never thought in my lifetime I'd be more excited to get a controller in my hands, to the DualSense controller. There's still a set on that. I think that when we talk about that, with the DualSense controller and all they put into it, you told me it was 3 years in development. I think they're trying to fully submerge you into your gaming experience of PlayStation. So kind of give us the details on that DualSense controller, because I'm super excited, super stoked to get that in my hands and just play a game with it.
So it's kind of, well, I'll get to that in just a second, but one more thing about the manufacturing part of it. What's interesting is that they they've been talking about doing a worldwide release for the console. Um, a lot of people think, oh, well, that's the whole world. No. I think in order to offset the lack of like the million or million and a half lack of consoles being released on launch day, some countries not going to get this system. And if you're talking about some of the big countries, okay, so let's just say the top three: United States, Japan, and Europe. Those are the top three countries that would be purchasing this console on day one, hands down. If you're talking about maybe Canada might get delayed, that's possible. Maybe parts of like obviously South America, they'll typically get it later. But it's possible that Sony may do a balancing act where they say, well, we thought about doing a worldwide release, but we're actually just going to release it in these three countries because we will have such a low number available. We want to make sure that these three countries get it. And then once the second quarter is over, which typically I think is March, then we will release another wave of consoles and go to different other countries too. So I think that maybe initially there'll be a scarce amount depending on what's going on, but I think that won't last too long. But there might be a case where Canada won't get it. Mexico might have a hard time getting it, but the United States and maybe even parts of Europe. I think there's possibility that maybe only Great Britain or only Britain gets it, or only, you know what I mean? There's going to be some real big juggling acts about that because their two biggest markets out of all this are Europe, Japan, and the Asian markets. So China may not get it. That's a big possibility. But it could be Japan, Europe, and United States. I mean, that may be the only three parts of the world that get it on day one, and that have enough available to get it.
And that makes sense because you want to get it into your biggest markets. So that obviously makes sense. And I didn't think we would see a shortage here. Just what you just talked about, so other places around the world that might have a hard time getting it, and then until they release some more.
Yeah,
I'm hoping to get a game day one and be able to play it. But we don't yet know a release date, do we?
Release date hasn't been confirmed. We know holiday. That could be anywhere from October, which is kind of early. They may not do October. They've done October before. Or November. And there's a possibility of December, but December might be too late in the year. I don't think that they would do that. They would capitalize before Christmas to try to release something. So if I was betting, I would definitely say November. If Sony wants to try to beat Microsoft and maybe be early out of the gate, I would say sometime in late October. But if the trend goes, I would say November, just because it just makes sense. It's still pretty much early in the holiday season. You're right before Thanksgiving. You're right before Christmas, and just at the plenty of hype would be surrounded already that people would be wanting to go out for Christmas. This is going to be one of those Christmas items that are going to be hard to find. So this is going to be kind of a big deal. And again, some people may look at it and go, I don't need it yet, and I think that's a good, valid thing. I think that obviously we're getting Last of Us Part 2 that will be on PS4, but I can guarantee you it will also be on PS5 with better features and more enhanced things and whatever. So, but there will be games that are only on PS5, and I do think that's my biggest question is I wonder how far these developing games are along with all this COVID-19 going on, with all this stay-at-home stuff going on. How fast could they make a game, and how easy could it be to make a game when everybody's at home? I mean, it's interesting.
Yeah.
So I think, but let me get to the controller because we talked about the controller. But
Sorry, I brought that in. I'm just super excited. I brought it in because I'm super excited about it, Jeff. I've never been. You just think of a controller. The first thing you think about it when I think of a controller is how does it feel in my hand? Um, what are some cool features of it? But it's just comfortability, and then it's basically you're pushing buttons to play a game. But this one makes it seem like it's going to bring you closer into a part of the game where PlayStation actually wants to immerse you into being able to play. And especially if you're working, if that works with the VR virtual reality, which I haven't yet to play that, but just kind of go over the DualSense controller and explain it a little bit for us, would you?
Yeah. So the DualSense controller is, I mean, Sony's trying to just basically do something different. I think they're really touting that this is going to be a generational leap. And when they mean generational leap, they mean that the graphics will be so good and so much of an improvement. The power of the system will be so much of an improvement. This is going to kind of be the equivalent to going from, like, I would say, the PS2 to the PS3. That was one of the biggest leaps we had seen because we went from
that was a big leap.
playing GTA 3 or so, very polygon looking game, to the PS3,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
a lot of people forget, but the PS3 had GTA 5. So you kind of compare, right? And it's drastic. It's very drastic. Now, granted, the PS3 lasted a lot longer than the PS2 did. I mean, it lasted almost 8 years. But that was a huge leap in terms of graphics and power and just the way the system was able to do stuff. It really was a huge step. PS4 was a big step, but I don't think it was that generational step that you typically would see. This will be the one system where you'll go, wow, this is a big deal. And it's really interesting because it's not all about graphics. A lot of people want to just go into the graphics, and the graphics are going to be, uncanny eye, right? You're not going to be able to tell the difference between real life and game, and that's very obvious. It's definitely going to be very more enhanced than now, but it's really Sony's taken a different approach. They're going with speed and optimization. So it's going to be more optimal. The games will load faster. The games will perform a little bit more smoothly. You'll get it's just, and the system's not going to do as crazy of a thing as trying to heat the console and cool it down. So it's just gonna. I think, to break it down, this is going to be one of those systems where when developers are making something for it, it's going to be optimized perfectly. So, for example, like PS3, you didn't see the full power of that system on day one. Like, it's not like we saw Last of Us.
Right.
That's the launch day of the PS3. We saw Uncharted 1, which, if you played Uncharted 1, then you play Uncharted 3, which was the last Uncharted on PS3. They're vastly different. Uncharted 1 does not look nearly as good as Uncharted 3. So you know that during that lifespan of that console, they've gotten better and better and better and better. Supposedly, according to the creator of the console, Mark Cerny, this system will take advantage of games day one. So the time of the amount of how long it'll take developers to squeeze every inch out of the system would be shorter with this console, which is amazing. Which is absolutely amazing, which means you're going to get some of the best looking games probably within the first year. So the best looking games you could possibly get out of it within the first year. And that's crazy. That's an insane idea. That does not happen in console. And even in the I would even say in the PS4, they were still, there's a few games coming out, like right now, Last of Us Part 2 blows my mind. I see gameplay of that sometimes, and I'm just like, how are they pulling that off? Like, this does not look like a PS4 game. This looks like something else.
I remember you showed me that video, and we were like, that's got to be PlayStation 5. The way it looked, the smoothness of it was insane. I can't wait for that game to come out. and I can't wait for PlayStation 5 to come
The
out. And it's funny because when you look at the graphics of the PS4 and you already think, "Gosh, this is so great! You can't get any better than this." But I'm sure
yeah.
we'll plug the PS5 in and just be blown away by how realistic it looks.
I think what's interesting, and let me get into control real quick before I start going on tangents.
Yeah, well,
So,
we haven't yet discussed that controller yet.
so the DualSense is they're taking a step back from the DualShock. DualShock was the name for years. Actually, I think it was since the PS2, maybe.
PS2? Yeah, I think
Maybe
so.
maybe the PS2. I don't think that the PS1 had rumbles in it. I don't think.
No, they're not.
So the PS2 had the DualShock. That's when they introduced it. They didn't have it initially, and then they had it like in the middle of the generation of the PS2, and it's been DualShock ever since. The reason for that is because they have motors in by close to the handles of the controllers, and based on they're weighted. So every time you do something, obviously it'll make a rumble, but it's not nearly as. It's more of like, okay, it rumbled, whatever that means, right?
Yeah,
It doesn't. I will say this: people have become accustomed for the rumble that it does not feel different. It does not have that same punch anymore. So the rumble's kind of an afterthought. When something rumbles now in a PS4 game, you're kind of like, yeah, okay, I get it. I mean, whatever. It doesn't matter. It would if it didn't do it, it wouldn't matter. So if it it's okay that it did, but it doesn't affect anything. Well, this controller is going to use let's compare to a console right now. The Switch Joy Cons, those two little things that slide into the top of or to the sides of the screen, use haptic feedback. So if there's a game where it has ice cubes and you shake the Joy-Con and you can feel more and more ice cubes going in it. It's very interesting. Phones have been using this for a long, long time. If you ever type and you have feedback where you feel it rumble, that's haptic feedback. So it's very interesting because it is a type of technology that can really do some interesting things. It can do various kinds of rumble, where it will simulate dirt on a road. It'll simulate a speed bump, a rock. And there's even instances where this can simulate heat and cold. It's really weird,
Interesting.
and even sounds. There's people
Rain
that
and stuff.
yeah, like there's people that have even said that they've heard sounds coming, actual audio from the haptic feedback inside something, and especially a Nintendo Switch. So I'm just like, it's gonna be interesting. I'm excited for the haptic feedback. I think it's awesome. I think it's different. I think it's something that will definitely enhance the controller and the experience, obviously, of playing a game. But the DualSense, the reason they're going with that is because this is straight up. They want you to feel the game. They want you to experience the game. They want everything to be as immersive as possible. They don't want to give you just a controller, but I want to give you a key to the world, kind of a thing. So it's really interesting. There's some interesting aspects to the controller that I want to point out. The buttons, for example, they're going away from the colors, and they're using a kind of glass, translucent kind of plastic, which is actually quite interesting. If anybody who's played a PlayStation Vita, not many people have. I have.
I have.
and that's familiar because the Vita had glass, translucent PlayStation buttons, and it had a glass, translucent digital pad. So the little cross pad, directional pad, on the opposite side. So that's something they took from Vita, which is kind of interesting. I think that's really cool because I like that design. Everybody knows
it
the
looks
PlayStation.
sweet.
They're looking at it like this. Everyone knows the PlayStation buttons. Everybody knows the colors. And then here's the interesting part. When you're seeing a game, now they don't have to constantly throw a color there. That kind of distracts you from the game. Now they can just throw the symbol. with
Right.
no color, or a symbol with a black circle with white, or a symbol with a white circle and kind of a black logo symbol. So it's kind of interesting. That now can't really distract you anymore. And some people have said that's distracting. So it's interesting. I like they did one thing that I will say this much, as much as people would be so mad, but they did take one little aspect of Microsoft, not the option button. Usually, like on the PlayStation 4, it'll say options. They have 3 dots. Now I know why they did that. They did that because phones have that design.
The settings,
Have
computers,
that design.
a lot
Yeah.
of things go that way.
So I see why they did that, but Microsoft's, at least on the Series X, they have that same little 3-bar hamburger menu type thing. So that's interesting.
Yeah, it's called the hamburger menu. Yeah.
And then on the share button, you have 3 little like kind of branching out, like bright. I want to say like kind of like a blink a little bit. Looks like a blink, but that's going to be very interesting because they haven't gone into great detail about the create button, which is now the create button. It was the share button, but what I'm hearing from a little bit of stuff is, at least in terms of news and things like that, is that Sony has a really interesting software called Sony Vegas, and it is by far one of the best I would say video editors you can get on a computer. I mean, people make YouTube videos with it. And it's you have to purchase it. It's an expensive hardware piece of software. But I wonder if they're going to put that kind of technology with the share button, where you're going to have really finite details of how you edit your videos, how to take the screenshots. I mean, there's going to be some really interesting aspects to that create button that I think will blow people's minds. I think they're going to take that share button and they're going to jump it 100%. I mean, they're going to make it 10 times better than it ever was before. And it will blow Microsoft out of the water. Why? Because Microsoft does not have video editing software like that. PlayStation has been doing it for years. So it's very interesting. They could even use some of the technology they used to make movies in terms of editing and use it for this. It's very interesting.
That'd be awesome.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so the other part that, and I don't know if I showed this to you or not, but if you look at, I think it's this one right here. I'm trying to see this picture. Are you seeing this picture?
No. Let's see. No, we don't have our video. I think we're just audio. I don't think we have video.
Let me share it real quick. Okay, can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
So underneath this, so you obviously see that's the PlayStation 4 controller.
All right.
The outline of that is PS5. So if you take a look at like how different in terms of size and stuff, little bit here, little bit here.
It's not that much bigger from this
No,
picture. And that was a big criticism when it came out, was it's an Xbox controller. But it's actually that's a good picture. That's actually a good post. Actually, if you would go ahead and send it to me when we get off of this, and that way I can put it out there, because that was the only, when I first saw it, after reading into on this controller, I'm going to probably fall in love with it. But that's the only negativity I had about it, was it looks like the size of an Xbox controller. But from this picture, I'm glad you have this. This picture actually shows it's not that much bigger than the PS4 controller. So that's great, because I was like, dude, it looks like a PlayStation. It looks like an Xbox controller. But
okay. And so really, there's just a little bit of longevity in terms of the handles itself. So this is just slight.
Up the top there.
Up at the top, it's domed up a tad, and that's where the touchpad. So actually, the touchpad got bigger. I can see.
Yeah, it did, and then it looks like even in the R1s and R2 buttons are actually smaller on the. It looks like it's a little shorter.
A little shorter, yeah.
than the
But
actual
I think they're a little longer, at least in terms of the R1. But the share button got pushed over a little bit. Or share button, and then the options button got pushed over to a little bit. But in terms of like the layout, it's very similar.
Dude, that
It's
is not that okay. I'm glad you're gonna send it to me for real, because I'm gonna have to put that out there on my Facebook page and stuff. But because when that's the biggest complaint, and everyone laughed at it. I'm like, yeah, it does kind of look like a big bulky Xbox controller, but this picture proves that that's not the case. So
no.
awesome.
No,
Awesome.
it's I will even say, I mean, in terms of like placement, it's spot on. I mean, if you're able to hold this controller, you probably would not realize it. If someone was blindfolded, I think they would not know right away. Now, the only difference they would know maybe is if it has some kind of texture that's different.
Right,
But,
right, more grip
right.
and if that's and then I told you this too. If the PlayStation 5 comes out and that's the only thing I have a gripe about is the size of the controller, I think we're doing just fine. So it also has the. Go ahead.
If you look here,
Mm-hmm.
there's a better grip.
Yeah, it's
on the
texturized on the back,
yeah.
to give you more of a grip. Because the
Texturized
texturized
on the triggers too.
I see that. That's nice. It is. It's going to be a slick, and it's also texturized on the joysticks. Nice.
Dude, those joysticks are going to be insane. These joysticks here, I've seen those on pro controllers.
Yeah.
So that's kind of crazy.
These
gonna be good.
these it's going to be a slick console, man. And I've seen a different couple designs that people have put out there, and I'm like, man, if it looks like that, that's going to be sick. So I cannot wait. Get that controller in my hand. Zoom in on that. Go ahead.
They also so the PlayStation, the one big difference is that we're all used to a button pressing to get to the menus and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes even turn on the system. That actually is going to be a logo. It looks like
logo.
a PlayStation actual logo. No button really, but it is a button. It's just going to be kind of like a emblem, I would say.
Yeah, that's awesome too. And then if you go in on the actually going to have the USB-C port for fast charging your controllers. Love that as well. It's one thing I really like, because all the phones and stuff a lot of things are going to that now, and I think to me it gets a better connection with my cell phones, and I'm gonna be able to plug my cell phone charger into it, and it's gonna be great. It's gonna be great.
So the also interesting part is they just went down like the light bar is different. So the light bar is not gonna be that triangular thing. It's gonna be more inside the actual touchpad here. Let me go to a little bit better of a. So this is the light bars will be on the sides of the touchpad. Now there's a light here, and there's a light right in the picture that Sony put out with their press stuff. There's a light right above the speaker grill. Okay. What's interesting about that, and I'm thinking they haven't talked about it a lot, but I think that this is going to be like an assistant. So that's going to be interesting. And that microphone will work, that they have built into it as an assistant too. So if you're having a hard time with games and stuff like that, that's going to be very interesting to be able to say, hey, I need a little help here, and it'll prompt up something to help you kind of show you a tutorial. It's very interesting.
What is that button under the emblem?
I think that's a mute button.
Is it okay? I see the muted microphone. I didn't know that was the mute button.
Yeah, I think that's a muted, and the microphone's right underneath that mute icon.
Okay, cool.
So it's interesting. There's in terms of specs, though, a lot of people want to jump on specs and they want to go crazy and try to compare and contrast and everything else. But I'll tell you this much: specs aren't always everything. And I'll say this much: they are and they aren't. But these particular specs are interesting because Microsoft went a more power. I'm gonna just bombard you with straight power, and Sony went with let's make sure that we don't bottleneck this system so that you can play your games at 4K 60 frames per second. You can play your games with high fidelity graphics without taking a hit. And then your system also won't heat up and everything else. It's very interesting because Microsoft went, most of it's the same. I will say that. Most of the console stuff in terms of what they're doing are the same. The only big difference is the teraflops. And that's the big one that everyone talks about because Microsoft's like, we got 12 teraflops and better than PlayStation. And PlayStation's like, well, we have 10 teraflops, 10.3 teraflops, but ours are overclocked. So ours can go at a higher frequency. So it's like Microsoft has 12, but it's at a lower speed. So it's kind of like there's interesting aspects to it. People have come out and talked about there's a big possibility that there will be a bottlenecking on the Microsoft console because some of the stuff seems to be a little overpowered. And Sony went down, yes, we don't have 12 teraflops, but if we added 12 teraflops, we run the problem of overheating our console and have a lot of bottleneck issues. So they went 10 instead, but they went a very good speed that will, I mean, honestly, dude, it's going to be so minute in terms of power difference that no one would know the difference. You're not going to know the difference between 12 teraflops and 10. You just
and
won't.
that's what, well, and to your average person who's playing on a PlayStation, you don't care about, you're not looking up and going, let me see how many teraflops I have. All right. To me, when I'm talking to you about this off the podcast, just me and you talking whatever, and what I get from it is Xbox wants to have the showy numbers, and we're all about power, and PlayStation's like, let me give you the smoothest experience that you're gonna have. With everything's gonna run smooth, it's gonna run fast, it's gonna run quick, and it's gonna do everything you want it to do. You don't need all this type of stuff in there.
Yeah. I mean, another thing is the SSD. Microsoft's using a solid state drive, but PlayStation is also using a solid state drive. Microsoft is at, I think, 8 seconds in terms of load times. The demo that Sony showed off behind closed doors that people somehow got a video of it, I think on a cell phone or something like that. But it was just a behind closed doors thing. No one was supposed to really see it, but it was Spider-Man being run on a PlayStation 5 dev kit. This was like months and months and months ago, probably even last year. And they were speeding through the city so fast that the PlayStation 4 couldn't keep up. So the PS5 was speeding through the city like nothing, just whizzing through, it loading everything in, no problem. So much so that they eliminated load times in that game with the PS5 dev kit. That was an old dev kit. That new dev kit is running faster than that one did.
Yeah,
faster.
Yeah, you showed me that video.
So
I saw that video as well.
It's absolutely mind-boggling, and a lot of that is because they're using a very, 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 very fast SSD that nobody has today. Nobody can buy it. Nobody has it. It's not in a computer. No SSD is like this one. It's very interesting. Not even Microsoft has this kind of SSD. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I didn't want to cut you off. I got maybe about 5 or 10 more minutes before we got to end this. But that being said, I had a question for you, and I want you to answer if I'm right or wrong. We're talking about the SSD, and I was reading up on it, and we were talking about how, for instance, in Zero Horizon Dawn, when your character's looking straight, the landscape is loaded, but behind you is not. With this SSD, it's going to allow everything to be loaded, so you can be able to go through things faster, no load times and all that. My question for you though, and to get about it in a long way, is with that SSD, would that allow games to be made, and then would that allow for creators to go in and add on to the map through a simple update?
Oh, absolutely. I think that what people don't understand is that they've created hardware in here that will stand the test of time. Ray tracing, hardware accelerated ray tracing, which is a huge deal. A lot of people thought it was going to be software based, which is not as good. Hardware based, and that's really live reflection. So when your character looks at a mirror, use that character. It's a live picture of the character, not a super enhanced, blurry shadow or blurry reflection. It's a real reflection. Everything in the world has its own thing. So if you play GTA and it rains, your car goes by that puddle, your car will absolutely reflect true reflection of that car while it's going past. Any of the reflections on the metal of the car itself is live reflections, like in real life.
That's
So it's kind
awesome.
of interesting. You have that, but this SSD will allow them to do many things. It's not just about load times. It's also about how fast your updates come to your game. So right now, if you update a game on the PlayStation right now, it has to reinstall the game. I never knew
Yes.
that. So when they do it, they deletes the stuff and then reinstalls the game and then reinstalls the patch and then it has to load it all. So it's like now with this SSD, it eliminates it. All they do is they go into the data, spread it out, put in the update, load it in, do only the update, and that's all you got to do. It doesn't delete the game, reinstall the update. It's just quick, and it's that. There's also world building. That's another one.
See,
If you ever
that to me is something awesome. Like, if they made a game, right? Say if they made the next GTA game and they made a kind of a smaller map, well, a little bit later they could go in and you come in, plug in the game, boom, I got an update. And next thing you know, they've added on. They have a whole new section of the map. You're like, oh, okay, cool. They can go back in and add more to these games.
in the past they had to do all these tricks. So if you've played God of War, if you ever go through a corridor and your character kind of squeezes through a corridor, they're
Yeah.
loading the other side of that map.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a trick. Now with this new SSD, that's gone. That's gone completely. So, and there's a lot of other interesting aspects what they're doing with the audio technology and how they're going to create 3D audio without headphones. It's
no way. Comes that going through the speaker
so
of the
so right here, the Tempest 3D audio tech, they're using frequencies to trick your ears. However far you are from your television, there's a sweet spot, and they'll explain it. But however far you are, there's a technology that'll trick your ears that it's listening to 3D audio without headphones.
Dude, that's sick.
And it's built into the system itself. They're using it's a
I didn't even know you could do that.
It's a custom technology. It's a custom technology that they worked on with AMD to customize the audio chip and use the RDNA chip too that they're using for this graphics engine, and they're using it as some kind of a CPU trick and making audio top notch, man, top notch. The audio on this system is going to be crazy. Absolutely crazy.
You literally just blew my mind. Literally, that is awesome, man. I think it's about time for me to wrap this thing up. The kids have to come in here and go to bed. So, but I appreciate you coming on, man. Talking about the PlayStation 5. We're super excited for that at the end of this year. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to have you on again. We'll talk more. We like to talk about sports and the draft, but we'll probably do another. I can see us do another PS5 update.
There'll be plenty of PlayStation updates here in the future. There's rumor of a mid to late May full reveal and full teardown of the console itself. So they're going to actually break open the console and show you everything, all the cooling technology. That's another big one. If you ever had a PlayStation 4 overheat, that's not going to be the case. Not going to be the case.
Well, because there's stuff on the controller we don't even know yet. We have not seen the back of the controller. So there's so much still to get into the system and console that is still probably going to blow my mind again and have me looking forward to it as well.
There's all the complaints that people had about the PlayStation 4, horrible battery life on the controller, the fans too loud, it sounds like a jet engine. All these things are going to be gone.
Yeah.
Complete.
I will agree that the battery life does suck on the PS4 controller. I have to multiply charge them and charge them and charge them and
Oh yeah.
But anyways, man, I appreciate you coming on here to Watson's Playbook and helping me out with this. And we'll get in probably next week, maybe, or the week after that, into the draft and how bad my team is going to suck next year because they did horrible in the draft, and how pissed I am about it.
Well, I will say this: Corona already won 2020, so we need to crown them a Super Bowl champ. Coronavirus. Because that
might not even have
that has absolutely taken over the whole world. So it's just kind of like, I mean, I don't even know what sports are going to look like in the next few months. So it's gonna be interesting.
That's a whole nother conversation we get into as well. But all right, Jeff. I think we're gonna go game before too long. So
alrighty.
All right, buddy. Thanks so much for coming on.
No problem.
All right, brother, man.
See ya.
Bye.